It is very ominous, just like the book, and it's very dark. It is a summer read. It's set in the summertime, the last summer of your life, and you're gonna want to die after you read this. Hey everyone, Diane here, and today I'm going to be going over some summer recommendations to get you into the hot summer months, so stick around and we'll get into it. Okay, so the first recommendation I'm going to do is The Elementals by Michael McDowell, and this is a book about kind of like a family dynamic. It kind of starts off with, or it does start off with the matriarch of the family. She dies, and so they're kind of picking up the pieces, and they just, long story short, they decide to go out to their kind of like their summer retreat in the Gulf shores of Alabama. And so they have 3 houses there, 3 Victorian houses there, where some terrible things have happened, where some ominous things have happened, unexplainable things have happened. So, you know, they go out there, things start getting weird, and it kind of just snowballs from there. And they are, you know, trying to figure out what's real, what's not real, what's, you know, kind of maybe brought on by grief. And this story is just so fun, and it's so creepy. It's so atmospheric. You really feel like it's hot and it's sticky, and you know, you want to like rinse off in the ocean and just kind of cleanse yourself from everything that's going on. So I would definitely check out, you know, The Elementals by Michael McDowell, and the cover is amazing. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. I also have another Michael McDowell recommendation. I don't have the physical book, but because I listened to it on Audible, and that's called Cold Moon Over Babylon. And that's also a Southern Gothic horror. It's a little different, obviously, from this book, but it kind of starts out with a murder. Like a young girl is murdered, well, she's not necessarily, she's about 16, is murdered. And so it kind of goes from there. They're trying to figure out who murdered her, why they murdered her. You know, it's a small town, so it's someone known. So they're kind of looking within their own circle for the murderer, why they did it. So the story gets complicated, and it almost reminds me of, if you've seen, what is that movie called? Like The Skeleton Key. It kind of gives off that like Southern Gothic vibe, but there's ghosts and it's haunting and it's, you know, creepy, and not to give too much away, but it's more, well, no, maybe I shouldn't say that because it will give something away. But it's just a fun summer read, and Michael McDowell's writing is so, like, kind of quirky, but at the same time, you know, there are parts that I laughed in the book and where I was like, okay, this character's, you know, the character building is really good. If I had to choose, I would probably start with The Elementals if I just, you know, had to choose one. Just because it's just, to me, it's quintessential summer. It's hot and you feel uncomfortable, but it's also like haunting. So yeah, so I would definitely give both of those a chance. Okay, so the next book I'm going to talk about is The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay. And as you can see from the cover, it's very dark and it's very depressing, but it's good. If you've read any other Paul Tremblay books, you know his writing is phenomenal. You know that he really pulls you into the story. It's almost like a black hole. Like you fall into the world of Paul Tremblay and you don't know if you're going to make it out alive. And this is no different. So the setting is, there's a couple, there's a gay couple that goes out to the woods to a nice little, a cute little cabin with their daughter, and they're just, you know, trying to live their life, trying to have a fun summer, do something different, and a group of strangers pops up, and you're not really sure, like, you know, what's going on, what's happening, why they're even there, how they even, you know, found this cabin out in the middle of nowhere. So the story goes from there, and it's very dark, it's very deprived, and it's very, you know, you don't really know what's going on. And it's a good summer read, like I said, because it's set at a cabin, it's in the summertime, and it's just, this couple. I don't want to give too much away. And it's a pretty short read, so it's, I've almost, given you a pretty good idea of what it's about. It's only, I want to say it's like less than 300 pages. It's actually like 270 pages. So it's a perfect short read. If you're just laying by the pool, you may not feel very summery after. You may, want to cry afterwards, but, in a good way. So yeah, now we're moving on to my next recommendation. Okay, so the next book recommendation is going to be Sundial by Catriona Ward. And as you can see, this cover is gorgeous. If I didn't know anything about the book, if I didn't know who it was by, if I was, just saw the cover, I would definitely buy it just for the cover because it's gorgeous and it's beautiful. And it reminds me of the summer because it's in the desert. So Sundial is about a mom, a suburban mom. She's married with 2 kids, and she starts noticing some strange things with her oldest daughter. She starts seeing like animal bones around. She starts kind of noticing her talking to imaginary friends and just doing some real weird stuff. So she's thinking, maybe I should take her and just have like some mom and daughter time, and we can figure this out. We can figure out if anything's going on and, where we need to go from there. So she takes her daughter out to Sundial, which is not a ranch, but it's a kind of farm type of thing out in the middle of the Mojave Desert. So they go out there and weird things start getting weirder. She starts noticing more, disturbing behavior from her daughter, and it just snowballs from there. She starts remembering things from her childhood that she'd kind of suppressed, and some things that she didn't realize were buried secrets. And so it goes from there, and, they continue to try and figure things out. But yeah, it's a really good book. I would definitely recommend it for the summer months because it feels, it's set in the desert. So I can definitely see myself in the setting and the sun setting, the desert. It looks beautiful. It's fun. It's haunting. It's scary, but it's still fun. You may not survive, but it's, that's why we read them, I guess. So I would definitely check out Sundial by Catriona Ward, and we'll get on to my next read. Okay, so my next recommendation is going to be Brother by Ania Ahlborn. And this book is crazy. I love it. I loved it when I read it. So it's about the Morrow brothers. It's a family. They live in the backwoods of West Virginia. And they live in like this dilapidated, old, like creepy, dirty looking house. It's just, stuffed in the back of the woods. And so some people start going missing, out in the country, which isn't necessarily too out of the ordinary in their neck of the woods. And so it kind of goes from there, and, the brothers kind of start exploring the town, kind of trying to see what life is like, more of like, not necessarily the city life, but more less rural than they're used to. So it kind of just snowballs from there, and the story gets wild, like things come together that you wouldn't have saw coming, and that you would hope that, hopefully this is not something that anyone has ever experienced. But if you've read any of Ania Ahlborn's books, you'll know that she is famous for just making you feel what the character's going through, because you really start to be involved in, or you start to feel like you're like not necessarily a part of the family, because that's the last thing you would want, but you start to feel like how the character feels, like ostracized, you're alone. You really have, you have this family, but it's almost so like going to be the death of you. So I would definitely recommend this book. Fun fact, we live in West Virginia. We've lived here maybe 2 years, and I could definitely see, it just made me imagine the atmosphere even more, because it's like set deep in the woods, and it almost feels very claustrophobic because you can't see past the woods. It almost feels like that's all there is. There's nothing beyond that. That's where you are. That's where you'll live. That's where you'll die. So I would definitely check out Brother by Ania Ahlborn, and Just let me know, how you liked it, what you felt about it, and yeah, we'll move on to the next book. Okay, so now for the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. And this book is amazing. It's everything like you want from a summer. Vampires. It's just basically it. So the book starts out with Patricia, and she is a stay-at-home mom in a southern town, in a southern city, and she, kind of has a lot on her plate. Her husband is a complete jerk. She has, two kids. I think one's a teenager and one's almost a teenager, so she's got that going against her. And she also has a senile mother-in-law who she's hoping to take care of. And there's a neighbor, or a new neighbor, I guess. He moves into the neighborhood, and things start going a little weird from there. And there's some people going missing, some children going missing, and some weird things that she's kind of putting together, whereas something strange is going on. No one wants to listen to anything she has to say, because what does she know? She's just a dumb stay-at-home mom. But it goes from there, and it's so fun. There were parts in this book where I was laughing out loud. I'm like, I want to be in this book club. I want to be in this true crime book club with all these fun friends and all this fun food. And there were some parts where I'm like, not to say in a bad way, but I couldn't believe that a man had written like some of these conversations between these women, because it felt so genuine and so fun, and you felt like you were really just like in with the group. It was just a really fun read, but there were also some really, really freaking dark parts of this book. So that's another thing I love about Grady Hendrix, is he can write some of like the funnest scenes, and have everyone having a good old time, and everyone, their personalities meshing so well together. But it's also like he has enough depth to really write some very dark and disturbing and some really haunting imagery in this book. One of the scenes, like, I don't think I'll ever forget, because it was so disgusting, but in the best way. So this is definitely a fun summer read. It's hot, you have vampires, and it's just quintessential summer. So yeah, I would definitely recommend picking up Grady Hendrix. So for my next recommendation is going to be The Outsider by Stephen King. And this is one of my favorite Stephen King books, just because it starts off with, it just starts and it never stops. There's never like a lull in the pacing or anything like that. So it begins with a gruesome murder. They find a young boy who's just like totally brutalized. It's just horrible. And, it's a small town, but fairly quickly the detective finds who he thinks, committed the murder. And it just spirals from there. There's two conflicting stories, which both seem true. There's evidence for both stories to be true, but they can't both be true. So it goes from there. And as you know, with Stephen King, there's some out of this world, creatures, things like that Stephen King's really good at. It almost feels like a true crime novel, but with like a supernatural side, which is one of my favorite kind of books to read. I love it where it's very, based on, this world, but it's also supernatural, which, kind of like it, kind of like there's, people are dying, but you don't really know what they're dying from. Could this be a creature? Could this be, something else? So that's a really fun aspect to this book. Even my husband, he's not a big fan of Stephen King. I know I did mess up in that, on that area, but he's not a big fan of Stephen King, but this book he even liked. And we actually started watching the show, and the first episode of the show is outstanding, amazing. So that's when he actually got into the book. And that's coming from someone who doesn't even like those kind of books or like those kind of movies or shows. And I mean, the book is obviously better than the show. The show is really good. It kind of deviates from the book in ways that make the show a little more unbelievable than the book is. But with that being said, it's still a pretty good show. But this, as a summer read, it felt like it was just like perfect for the summer. It's hot. It's, set in kind of like the woods. They kind of get lost, and once in one part of the book, they kind of get lost in like a festival, a really funky, freaky looking festival, and so it, it kind of goes from there. But yeah, I would definitely check out The Outsider, especially if you're into Stephen King. It's not necessarily a short read. It felt short to me just because the pacing, like I said, was on par, and it was just, from start to finish, just an easy read that I felt like kept me on my toes, but at the same time I was like, oh, okay, this is just I don't want to put it down. I want to see what happens. I want to see how both of these stories are both true. And that was the most interesting part, that it was like, well, if that's true, how's that true? So it was really fun. So I would definitely recommend The Outsider for those of you who are big Stephen King fans. Okay, so now for my final and most favorite summer read is The Fisherman by John Langan. And as you can see, this has a gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous cover. Funny thing about this book is my husband recommended it, and he was like, oh, I found this, The Fisherman. I'm like, okay, like boring. But once I saw the cover, I was like, okay, maybe you do know what you're talking about. But this was actually a Bram Stoker Award winner, and for good reason. The writing in this book is gorgeous. Everything about this book is like flawless. I know some people will say it's a little slow, but I didn't feel that. I didn't feel like it was slow. I just felt like, the story was building. So it starts out with two men becoming friends or kind of bonding through tragedy, two tragedies that happen, and they're kind of trying to hold on to, some sense of normalcy, coming together and going fishing, and just trying to find a friend that you have something in common with. And so they end up, finding, it's called the Dutchman's Creek, and they end up getting sucked into this lore story of, just a story surrounding that area, and the story goes from there, and some wild and crazy things start happening, which you wouldn't really imagine from the title, but it just gets so crazy, but in the best ways. And it's cosmic horror. If you've never read cosmic horror, it's more Cthulhu-esque, where it's just very expansive. It's, not, it's very expansive. It's very out there. And you feel very small when you're reading this book. At least that's how I felt. I felt very like, not overwhelmed, but there's just so much, like, this imagery in this book is amazing. Like, I don't even think they can make this into a movie, because it would just be too much, and it wouldn't translate like it can in your mind. And the way you see everything is just so cool. And so the book goes on from there, and some crazy things are happening. There are two separate like storylines, so it will switch from the two, I forget their names honestly, but the two main characters, and then it will switch to another storyline. So you do get kind of sucked into one story, and then it'll change to another story, and then you get sucked into that, and you don't want to go back to the previous one. So I mean, it's good, but I mean, it's bad, but in a good way, because you're so invested in one story that you don't really, not necessarily care, but you don't want to go back. You don't want to leave them where they are. So yeah, so The Fisherman is definitely probably one of my top favorite reads of all time, but definitely in summertime, because they're in the woods or by the river. It's just very atmospheric, and it's very fun. And well, actually, it isn't very fun, but it's a good story that I didn't want to put down, and that it just made me feel very, like I said, very small, and very like there's just this expansive world beyond anything that is imaginable, but it's very cool. It's very, I just love it. I love this book so much. So I would definitely recommend John Langan, The Fisherman. And yeah. Okay, so my last, I guess this is more of an honorable mention, is It by Stephen King. And I know what you're thinking. Yeah, we know. We've all heard it. We've all seen the movies, seen the show. But I feel like this is such a fun and atmospheric read for the summertime, because, it's a coming of age story. The kids are out on summer break. They may not survive summer break, but it'll still be fun for us anyways. So I just feel like this is just so fun and so like scary. There's some parts in this book that I was scared at. There's not many books. Yeah, I read a lot of horror, but you don't always get that, oh, scary vibe, or necessarily being scared, I guess is more, of what I mean. But it was so good, and I actually haven't read this physical book. I've listened to it on Audible, and I've read some of the book, like some of the physical books. So that's one thing I might do this summer is read the physical copy of it, just to get a little deeper into the characters, get a little deeper into the book, because I feel like on Audible, which I may make another video about this, is how people feel, or how you feel about reading a physical copy versus listening to it on Audible. There's some books that I feel like I didn't get the full experience just because I didn't listen, or just because I listened to it on Audible and I didn't read the physical copy, because I feel like it is much more personal when you're reading it versus when you're listening to it. And you got other stuff going on. You got to rewind it, or you lose your spot or whatever. So I think I might try and read the physical copy of this summer. It is a very, very long book. So we'll see. That's a goal. It might not be an attainable goal, but it's a goal. So we'll see how that goes. But if you like this video, if you felt like, I had a pretty good list, or if you have any other suggestions, please leave those suggestions in the comments. I'm a very seasonal reader. So I like to have, a lot of options of books for the summer or whatever. So if you felt like this is a video that, you got something from, that you liked it, or, enjoyed what I had to say, or if you even just want to hate on me and subscribe anyway, I'll take it. So please like and subscribe, and just tell me how I did in the comments. So we'll see you next time. Bye.